All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pivoteers and Pioneers, Technology-Enabled Recovery in the Age of Social Distancing. As we have witnessed during the shutdown, the use of technology has been an integral part of everyone's pivot, and most businesses are realizing that tech-driven solutions will be part of our successful economic recovery, stability, and future growth. But the golden question is, for any endeavor, which tech is right for your business, for your career choices, for your educational path? Which form will that tech take? Is it software, hardware, retraining, or all of the above? And which choices and investments of time, energy, and money will give you the edge to thrive over the next 10 years? Well, that's what a technology hub is. And Open Hub is that. We're a resource center that empowers people to exchange ideas about how technology can improve our existing businesses, towns, work opportunities, and educational paths so that we are empowered to create our future. Pivoteers and Pioneers is an interactive discussion featuring local businesses sharing stories on how technology helped during the pandemic shutdown. And Open Hub believes that sharing these stories can help make a difference for the recovery of our local economy. And we hope this webisode series is helpful and interesting to everyone participating today. My name is Shelley Tween. I'm Communications Coordinator for Open Hub. And now I'd like to introduce the founder of Open Hub, the organization producing the series. So, Yulia, take it away.
Thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Yulia Ochinikova. I am the founder of Open Hub. Open Hub is committed to building a thriving technology sector in the Hudson Valley by promoting, training, and facilitating for the growth of a strong and accessible technology-driven economy. Partnering with stakeholders and businesses, our technology hub functions as an open ecosystem resource center for the entire Hudson Valley region. Next slide, please. This webisode series is our exploration to discover pivoteers for the Hudson Valley HVTechFest in October. We are proud to showcase these heroic businesses who were able to pivot to the new abnormal during the shutdown. We are happy to produce Pivoteers and Pioneers as our way of contributing to the full recovery of the entire Hudson Valley.
Thank you, Yulia. All right, so now to introduce our featured pivoteer, we are thrilled to have MonitorMe with us of Poughkeepsie, New York, and we have Rachel Mcintosh, the VP of Implementation and Support, and Justin Doro, Wellness Coach. So, hi, Rachel and Justin. Good to see you.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
I'm really looking forward to sharing stories. It was very interesting when I first started interviewing you guys. I was like, what does a high-tech company have to say about the pandemic? They're already techie, so how did they pivot? And there's so many ways that happened. And then our theme ended up being when high-tech meets the human touch. So I think it's a very interesting story. But first, I'm hoping that you can start with telling us about MonitorMe. Why did it start? And a little bit about how it works.
Sure. So our founder is Dr. Anthony J. Bakke. He is an entrepreneur, he's a physician, and he's always worked in healthcare trying to find a way to make it better, find a way to see what we have and how technology can improve the care for our population. The most recent endeavor we were on is called Imagine Mick, which if you see my email, it says Imagine Mick. We're still holding on to that one. And he was an owner in nursing homes, and he didn't particularly care for the level of service that nursing homes offered. So he created technology that really raised that standard of care and improved the the readmission rate, keeping folks in place, not letting them go to the hospital. And we did that through telemetry and physician oversight in the nursing homes. So he took that same concept and he applied it to his own life. His mother was 93 years old, living at home alone, didn't want to go into a facility, wanted to maintain her independence, and had quite a complex health history. So she lived an hour and a half away, and every time he had to he had to drive an hour and a half just to find out that she was just either lonely or anxious, or maybe was a little bit ill but didn't really require a trip to the hospital. So he developed the Imagine Mick in nursing home technology to work in the home setting, and that's the genesis of MonitorMe. It is a very simple to use technology, but a very complex platform. But the end user never knows the issues. So I'm sorry, I saw a question pop up. No, unfortunately, his mother is not the beta test. She passed before he completed his mission, but he wanted to take that same concept and move it along to everyone out there. Every single person I speak to about this program says, I know somebody that could use this. I know somebody who has a loved one at home who needs to be better managed with technology. So that's sort of where it all came from. And our founder is very driven to spread this to as many people as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's always great when you have an idea that comes out of a personal need, and it's a great way to grow an idea. On the next slide, we are starting to talk about the changes that were brought on by the COVID-19 shutdown. And also, before you even get started, you can also explain, you could just explain what people are seeing in this slide. In the previous slide, there was a picture of the patch that people wear that communicates the information, and
Sure.
maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So the technology is multifaceted. So first, you need a communication device, an audiovisual tool to communicate with folks, and we chose a tablet. That's big for old folks who have fragile fingers and arthritis. It's large enough it can sit on a stable surface, and they just tap one button and they can have an audiovisual communication with a nurse or a doctor or a wellness coach, as the case may be. So that technology also facilitates the transfer of data. So we have 2 lead ECG patches that patients can put on their chest and transmit into our monitoring center, which I'll explain in a minute, but that's just in this big thing. And then we have blood pressure cuffs, pulse oximeters, weight scales if needed, glucometers if needed. All the technology is driven by the patient's need. So whatever their medical needs are, we have technology that will help bring us the data to better understand and manage their illness. The audiovisual tool, the tablet that we use to communicate, goes from patient's home to the monitoring intervention center. And the monitoring intervention center is the very unique piece. It's the human factor in this technology push. So many companies have telehealth. Telehealth is just very loosely communicating and treating folks remotely. Our tools facilitate our monitoring center. So we have doctors, nurses, NPs, PAs, and amazing wellness coaches who are all sitting in a room, seeing this data coming in, reaching out to patients in real time, saying, hey, I noticed your blood pressure's a little high. I'm just checking in to see how you're feeling. So the combined effort between the cold hard facts of the data and the technology and the warm and fuzzies of a human interaction is really what complements our program.
Yeah, and that was, there was a question I had. First of all, can you talk about, I know that MonitorMe was not covered by insurance before the pandemic shutdown. So can you talk about the change in that? Because then we'll get to the next thing, which is a story about someone I know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So before COVID, there were 2 ways that you could become part of the program, either private pay, which, you know, some folks just can't stand the idea of sending their loved ones into a nursing facility, nursing home and such, so they would pay for the service. Or there are some programs. There's one called PACE, which is a program for all-inclusive care for the elderly, which would pay us to care for their patients remotely. So it was through those private pay efforts that folks could get involved in the program. With COVID, CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, really changed the rule set, at least temporarily, and it may end up become permanent, in that they will now reimburse for our services because they don't want folks leaving their house to go to the doctor. They want them to stay at home. And the value of our program really became evident in that time.
Yeah. And so when you told me about that, that's when it became interesting. First of all, it makes it a lot more accessible for people, that it's covered by an insurance for older folks. And I knew of a neighbor that another neighbor of mine always checks on these neighbors. They're an elderly couple. They're in their 90s. And during the shutdown, he's in a wheelchair. She gets around with a walker, but his condition, I think, is much more severe. And at one point, his legs started swelling. Their aide wasn't coming to their houses often in order to protect their health. And the wife called the ambulance service, and the ambulance service said, we're not stopping at residences right now, which is a big change during the pandemic crisis. And then they had to wait 2 more days for an aide to show up who had to use her own car and transfer both folks into her car just to get them to the hospital. But you said that just wearing that patch, that there could have been a whole different way of understanding. So I was like, I don't understand. So if you would talk about that telemetry, the communication of different factors, that says a lot about a person.
Of course. So, you know, telehealth requires information. It's really hard to assess and evaluate a person over a phone or even over like a Zoom. So the tools that we use, like you mentioned, the telehealth, the telemetry patch also uses a weight scale, so you can step on a scale and get a weight, blood pressure, and a pulse ox. All of that data coming in tells a story. The case that you're speaking of where the legs swelled, that's a condition called congestive heart failure, when there's too much fluid backed up in their system. Our technology would pick that up before they were in crisis, and they would be able to be treated in their home with medication that they already have, just increasing the dose. And they would never have to go out to the hospital, and they would never have gotten in that situation where they needed to call 911. And in that, you know, it was a crazy time with ambulances not being allowed to go to homes unless it was a, you know, critical moment. And people were very confused and very concerned. And I think we might talk a little more about it later, but our volume of calls and our volume of patients drastically increased because of that fear of, I can't even call 911. Who do I reach out to if I need help?
Yes. All right. Thank you. All right. I think we covered most of those stories. If we can go to the next slide, we will. So, which gets us to Justin, and the changes that were brought on by the COVID shutdown had to do with an increase in call volume. But Justin, what we ended up talking about last week was, it wasn't just a call volume, but the specific types of calls. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could describe, first of all, what your role used to be like before the pandemic shutdown, how often you spoke to people, stuff like that. And then what happened? What was the big change during the pandemic shutdown?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin. I'm a wellness coach here at MonitorMe, previously known as Madge and Mick. And before COVID hit, I'd say that my job description was kind of just to triage calls for the nurses and the doctors within the monitoring center. The patients would call in I would answer. And if it was a very simple call, let me get your blood pressure, your heart rate, your oxygen level. Okay, those are all within normal limits. Let me put these into our system. Do you have any complaints? No, good, bye. That's a very simple, what a pre-COVID wellness call looked like. I gathered their vital signs. I asked them, if they were okay. If they were, we ended the call. If they had a medical complaint, I passed them off to a nurse. Then COVID hit. And just like with every human that was experiencing COVID for the first time, fear set in. And these patients, let me backtrack a little. When a patient joins our program, they are available to contact us through that tablet 24/7. There's a little button that says call my nurse right on the center of the tablet, and they can call in whenever they need help. When we set up the initial enrollment, we make a wellness call schedule, whether that be they want 1 call a week, 3 calls a week, a daily call, et cetera, et cetera. Prior to COVID, most patients, I would say, picked 1 to 2 days a week that they were willing to let me call them. Once COVID hit, and I spoke about that fear set in, these patients were calling in multiple times a day with fear. The fear, as COVID set in and settled in society, the fear turned to anxiety. Now I'm stuck inside like you spoke about earlier, Shelley, my aid's not coming as frequent because they're worried about their health and they're worried about bringing the virus into the patient's home. So now there's an elderly patient sitting at home who is super anxious and scared that they are going to get sick and die. And so we could see on the telemetry, as you saw in the previous picture, the EKG readings, we could see the heart rates elevate. And the patients would start to call in and would just need someone to talk to. Which I'm very good at, just talking to people. I also talk a lot, so I'm probably trailing off from the original question.
You're not. You're not at all.
Okay.
No.
And so I think I said the fear turned into anxiety. And then once society learned that we're all just really anxious right now and home alone, the anxiety then warped into depression. Now these elderly patients can't see their families. They're not getting their aids. They can't go to their centers where they play bingo, they hang out with their friends, they see their boyfriends and girlfriends, which I think is very endearing that these elderly patients say. And then now they're depressed because they have no one to speak to. And so they get me. And so these patients, many of our patients would call me multiple times a day once that depression set in, just to have someone to talk to, just have someone tell them that they matter. Because that depression manifested in these patients thinking that they don't matter, that when they do call their families, they are a burden. Because they need that connection. Yeah. And so just being there for them kind of changed their world.
Well, that's why I wanted you on this episode. When I was originally talking to Rachel, there was 2 things. One, she said that your department had to, I think, quadruple, right? You were the only wellness coach, and then overnight you're like, no, we need to staff up, which I was surprised to hear. First of all, there's not very many wellness coaches that work for a department of healthcare workers where there's nurses and doctors. Usually it's 2 separate worlds. So it's nice to hear about the worlds coming together. It was interesting to hear that you needed more wellness coaches. Mm-hmm. And that's why on the slide, I was talking about how do we define health, and maybe we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more. But Rachel, I was wondering if you can talk to me about the problem that Medicare was covering MonitorMe, but they weren't covering the wellness calls.
You're absolutely right. So you kind of alluded to it a little bit even in your statement prior to that, which is usually it's separate, wellness and medical care. And unfortunately, they, as most people know, they're very intertwined. So when you're talking billing and reimbursement, wellness is not really covered. Preventative care, sure, a little bit, but not really wellness, the overall approach to health. So we can bill for a doctor talking to a patient, we can bill for the vital signs being regularly monitored, but we can't bill for Justin's human touch, bringing these people through this cold technology that we are all using now as our only lifeline. He brings this lifeline of warmth, and that's not something you can bill for. But we felt that it was so valuable to our patients, and Justin just said it, you see these folks and you see their heart rates increasing. And if we didn't take a minute to talk to them and to do that wellness reach and that really therapeutic approach, that holistic person approach, we may have prescribed a medication perhaps, or gone a more clinical approach rather than just talking to them and then watching that same elevated heart rate come back down, and them thanking him and saying, can I call you later, I feel so much better. Also on their end, knowing that we can see that and
Yes.
that we're watching it and that we'll call them if we see something concerning. All of those pieces together are what make this so impactful on the patients. It's not one piece individually. It's not just the patch. It's not just the wellness coach. It's the combination of all of these things together that make it so impactful.
Well, and I also think it's interesting because are you recording all the telemetry that's coming through in your data center?
Absolutely.
Because then you actually are starting to gather clinical proof that a wellness call is doing the work of pharmaceuticals. And,
Absolutely.
and pharmaceuticals cost insurance companies a lot more, right? So it saves costs, but also it's less interactions with other things. So overall, the people's health is a little bit better because there's one less medication to prescribe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super interesting. Justin, I also heard that your role changed. Then you started writing your job description differently. Because also, did you train your coworkers? Like you already had sort of a system established. So do you want to talk just a teeny bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role has changed drastically since I started. Oh my gosh, Rachel, how long have I worked here?
Over a year now.
Yeah. And so I started, as I said, as just a triage. The nurses, the doctors needed help. Someone to answer the calls so that they could focus on the clinical side of things and I could collect easy data. And that quickly morphed into me being very curious about the medical field. I was like, I'm sitting in front of these glowing screens that have squiggly lines all over them, and I don't know what any of that means.
Like the Matrix.
Yeah, that's what I called it to all my friends. I was like, I work in the Matrix now. But me being a naturally curious human being, I was like, this isn't enough. I want to know what this language in front of me is. And so I approached Rachel, I approached Dr. Kubert, our medical director, and I said, hey, I'm sitting in here. I want to learn what these squiggly lines mean. And so they were like, yes, please. And so they registered me for the National Telemetry Association. I'm currently in the middle of getting certified to be a telemetry technician so that I can read the telemetry and actually watch and understand the effect that I'm having on my patients. That while I'm talking to them, I see their heart rate escalate with anxiety, or might I throw in their heart escalate when they see me and get very excited. And then throughout—
They do love you.
this they do. It's funny, a lot of my coworkers, I'll be on one call And then I hear, oh, he's on another call. And then another coworker says, oh, he's on another call. You have to wait in line. And they all just line up just to talk to me, which I find very endearing.
Amazing.
So the telemetry kind of evolved into my job then, being able to help the nurses and the doctors read the telemetry, notice that patient X's heart rate is really, really fast, and to be able to be the one to call them because I understand what that number means. Because the nurses and the doctors are really busy, and they're getting billed to do the clinical work, and we want to be able to let them do their clinical work and let me focus on the emotional well-being of our patients.
Well, it's very interesting. It's the women's labor of caring meets hard science, you know, and clinically trained practitioners, and really it's hopefully putting it together. I'm hoping that out of this personally, there becomes a stronger link to support the labors of caring as an intervention to aid people's health, which is something we've all sort of known, but we actually have to prove it also. So there's that. And one more story, because we're getting closer to people asking questions. But Justin, there's on your slide is a picture of you looking into a monitor, and then there's a picture of a woman looking at you. So there's a short video. We can't really play the video, but I was wondering if you could tell what was sort of special about this. I think this screenshot comes from an interaction during the shutdown. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Any sharing you want to do about that? That also adds a part to the storytelling. Thanks.
Yeah, so absolutely. So this patient is very, very near and dear to my heart. And she is a very sociable human being, but she is also housebound naturally. Before COVID, you know, she's housebound. She's in a wheelchair. She did just get a wheelchair upgrade and she can go outside now.
Good.
But that's besides the point. But once COVID hit, prior to COVID, she relied on the interactions of her aides. She loved having the aides come to visit her. She loved having her cleaning lady come to visit her because it gave her socialization. COVID hits, and this patient has none of that. And so she then started with the staff to the point where she slowly but surely let us know that what was going on medically. Fast forward to her birthday, and we, as you can see in the picture in the background, the whole mixed staff said, we have to sing happy birthday to this patient. So we call the patient, we surprise her, we all sing happy birthday. She is brought to tears, and then privately calls me later that day and talks to me about how much of an influence we've had on her life. And that if we didn't care, that no one would. Those are words directly out of her mouth. If we didn't care, that no one would.
Yep. She was one of our first patients, and she has stayed with us through this entire process. And she's a perfect example of why the patients love Justin, because he knows it's their birthday. He knows they got an upgrade in their wheelchair. He knows when their aides are supposed to come. He knows if they didn't eat breakfast and their hands are a little shaky. I overheard an interaction the other day where he was talking to someone and they didn't feel good and I just feel shaky. And he said, well, you usually eat breakfast by now. Did you eat breakfast? This level of knowledge about a human being's life, and he has a lot of patients. There's hundreds of them. So the fact that he can recall that, and I'm not sure if he keeps notes or it's all in his head, that kind of personal touch goes so far beyond anything any clinician could do, because they're managing the clinical piece. Yeah. You can't do both, all clinical and then remember those other things too, maybe occasionally, but not at the level that Justin does. And that, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but you also, Rachel, you also told us an interesting story where there was a nursing home situation where there was no doctor available during an emergent situation. So just if you could tell what your doctor did in the nursing home, because the clinicians are really taking care of crisis situations of a different level. And can you tell that story just so we have a rounded picture of healthcare?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Bucky brought this technology into the nursing homes. So it's, you know, the 2-lead ECG patches on the patient. The data streams into our monitoring center, and our doctors and nurses are responsible for managing that and reaching out to the nursing home if there's changes. So in certain crisis situations where, say, a patient is having a cardiac arrest or some sort of major clinical event, our doctors will often run those code blue. And so when Justin is saying the doctors and nurses are so busy, that's what they're doing. They are taking that data, responding to it, interacting, walking nurses and sometimes even other doctors through a cardiac arrest or some terribly critical situation, so that they don't have to be sent out to the hospital for everything. And that became so much more important with COVID, because they really weren't sending them to the hospitals. The hospitals were inundated and overflowing with patients. And so we managed a lot more critical patients, both in the home and in the nursing home. And that's all while Justin is doing this therapeutic approach, the clinicians are doing this really crisis management, high-level clinical care remotely.
And I think it's very, I'm hoping that people who are listening are able to start hearing a more full picture of, first of all, about the conversations around health. What is health? I swallowed water wrong. And what kinds of healthcare should be covered, but also how this level of care can integrate with nursing homes and hospitals. It's just a nice, well-rounded picture. Let me look at
I throw in something really quick to kind of bridge again the emotional and the physical health. Dr. Cooper and I were actually talking about how he is discovering that as the patients are creating this relationship with the wellness coaches, that those same patients are more willing to tell Dr. Cooper what's wrong. They're more willing to break down the wall between us, the physical wall of the tablet, but also the wall of fear of, I'm going to trust these people through this piece of plastic with my health information. And Dr. Coupert's realizing that as that relationship is building with the patients and the wellness coaches, that the relationship is strengthening between the patients and the clinicians. And so it's really cool to watch the relationships build on top of each other.
Yeah, and then the doctor can do a better job by not, like last time you were saying, by not prescribing something, that there might be an intervention, not interaction. Is that the right word? There might be an interaction between two medications. If you didn't know, they're already on maybe an anti-anxiety medicine. Sure. And the doctor's prescribing something that now that they've revealed more about their health history, and yeah, awesome.
I just want to say one thing because I feel like it's important. The patient that we showed on the screen gave us full permission to share her picture and her story. I just don't want anyone to think we're breaking any HIPAA violations or anything like that. She said, please tell everyone. I think everyone should have this program. You can use my picture, you can use my video, you can use my name, you can tell everyone all about me. So she gave us full permission. I didn't want anyone to be concerned about our HIPAA compliance.
And she would tell all of you to be our patients.
Yeah. She would.
She was excited.
She would.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's an interesting point to leave off at this point. Hopefully, some of this data can be submitted to encourage changes in policy so that wellness calls and any kind of wellness treatment is covered as a medical treatment, so that we can keep people healthier with less drugs and all the benefits of that cost, and how it's taxing on the body to have many medications. There's that, and also this idea that I just want to keep focusing. This tech is fantastic, but without the great people. So we can value tech, but let's also remember that it's great people using tech well is the secret sauce, you know. And we saw that in the last episode 2 weeks ago with HVTFCU, that it wasn't just their investment in tech that made them pivot, but it was also a CEO who believed in transparent leadership and communication and open communication so that people could be innovative and take risks suggesting ideas, and that people are nimble and they would just jump on ideas. So yes, they had tech, but they had that kind of open leadership. So it's stories over and over again, the balance between great people, great teams, and great tech that can help. And in our first story, we saw a family-owned business, a restaurant, where one of the three owners, one of the three brothers, he really focused on what tech is out there to help my business turn around. So again, yeah, the tech's out there, but we need great people and people who are open to these ideas. So just wanted to thank you. I think we're ready to start question and answers. And anytime, Justin or Rachel, that you want to, like, this is an open question and answer session for anybody who's watching who wants to ask a question, even if it's just to share your story about how you adapted with technology during the shutdown. Fantastic. And so Rachel and Justin, feel free to jump in, and just thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for what you're doing.
So, do we have?
Will
Yes.
was raising the hand, or he was applauding? William, are you around? Are you here?
I was applauding.
Yay.
Okay. Is
This
there
is a great
any
story.
questions that anybody has?
The question is what can be improved, I guess, right?
What can be improved? Oh, there's always room for improvement. You know, Shelley, you just said something about the former CEO having that sort of transparency and that ability to allow people to grow and come up with their own innovations.
Yes.
Not only has Justin recreated about 3 or 4 times his own position, and the definition of that position has changed based on the need, but also our technology. I think Anthony is somewhere on here, and he's probably not got his picture up, but our director of technology, our designer of our entire program, has been able to come to us at any time and say, you know what, I would like to make the technology do this. And that ability to have the freedom to make decisions based on what your vision is and how you see things really broadens. Any employee in our company can come and say, we want to try this. And our founder will say, okay, let's try that. And it has brought our technology so much further along in half the time, I think, than other companies would have.
Yes.
Ideas need to come from multiple perspectives.
In an open environment that it doesn't punish risk-taking. We hear it over and over again, but it's a great example. Yulia.
But it looks like you were initially the technology company. So you were in technology or like healthcare provider. How would you position yourself initially, and if you pivoted it towards something like more specific?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because we did have a little bit of a multiple personality disorder initially. We weren't really sure. We knew we came from nursing homes, and we knew we wanted to improve the care. We knew we wanted to do it through technology, but we just weren't sure what the best way to do that was. So we invested a lot of time in the technology to bring what we had as a budding technology company into a much more mature technology company. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the line, we realized that what Shelley was saying, without the people, which are in our monitoring intervention center, we don't really have that full closure. We don't really have that complex care program that we want. So we added in the people actually after the technology was started. The monitoring center coming on board then even further expanded our technology, because the need to have data so that I can make clinical decisions, the need to be able to have the patients access us at the touch of a button. All of those needs is what drove the development. So when you say, are we medical or are we technology? I think we are the truest definition of a medical technology company, the combination of the two.
We have one more, thank you, Rachel. We have one more question. Shelley, help us with this question, but before that.
If David doesn't want to read it, he didn't last time. So, okay, so David Jachowski has a question. He says, is MonitorMe able to utilize the stream of health data to better serve the patients?
100%, 150%. So data, as you know, is so helpful in so many different ways. It's the new currency because it's so valuable. So we use the data not only to respond to patients in real time, to see that their ECG has changed, that their blood pressure has changed, but also we trend it. It's a longitudinal approach to data as opposed to a moment in time. Typically in healthcare, you get an EKG, that's 3 seconds of time. It just takes a snapshot of what your health is at that moment. Same thing with a blood test. Same thing when you go to your doctor's office and you get your vital signs taken. It's a snapshot. It's a moment in time. This new data approach, this stream of health data, as you put it, is looking at it over time, looking at it in different situations. What does it look like when you're sleeping? What does it look like when you're active? What does it look like when you're stressed? What does it look like when you're anxious and you need to talk to Justin? So it does improve our care, our overall care. So we're not just throwing a medication at a problem. We're really finding the source and the cause of that problem. And sometimes it's a medication, but oftentimes it's a lifestyle change or a mental health check or something else that we may not have seen had we taken that snapshot.
And you're also getting baselines for people that are appropriate for their body. For example, 98.6 isn't the normal temperature for every single human. So all those different kinds of uniqueness can then show you the contrast. If I have a lower baseline temperature and then I have a 99-degree fever, it actually is a 2-degree jump for me as opposed to other people. So that's very interesting.
It's a good point, Shelley. We base our parameters. We have like a standard set of parameters of what norm is for people, but then we can adjust them. Let's say, you know, somebody normally has a little bit of a higher blood pressure. We can raise that set of parameters to say, okay, you have a little wider, and then somebody who's normally low, okay, you can go a little lower before we worry. Same thing with heart rate and respirations and everything. So, and oxygen level. But, you know, particularly speaking of the data, you know, your friend who couldn't get picked up by the ambulance with the swollen legs, that is a true test of how data can impact health. Patients with congestive heart failure will start to increase their weight, increase their blood pressure, increase their respirations, decrease their oxygen. These are all trackable and trendable data points. You put it on a grid, on a graph, you can see, hey, we're heading for trouble. And all of this is where we're headed with, you know, AI and all sorts of algorithms that we can put into place that will really, they'll tell us when to worry about our patients before our patient says, I'm short of breath. We're going to call the patient and say, we see that you're trending in the wrong direction. You're probably going to become short of breath. Let's change your care plan.
It's putting everything into the context.
I also heard that in ICUs during the pandemic shutdown in hospitals, they were moving the monitoring systems out into the hall so that and doing extra long wires. So patients were isolated in the rooms, and it makes sense to protect the people who are caregivers. However, one of the side effects of that is people being severely ill and then extremely cloistered. And the caregivers in the hospital, all practitioners are caregivers, they felt terrible about this, and yet they didn't want to get sick. So I just want to loop it back to yes, you can take care of someone's vitals, but to have at the same time and some kind of way to give some caring communication for the person who is either isolated or ill is very important, and you have the data to prove that it actually helps their health. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Justin, you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to add on to the better serving the patients is that I think something unique about our technology is the transparency for the patients. When you go to a doctor's office, they take your blood pressure, they take your temperature, they hold on to that data. The tablet that our patients are given, it shows them the trend. It says this is where you know, after they take it 3 times a day for a week, they're going to get a trend on their tablet that tells them this is my norm. This is my baseline, so that they can track it at home as well as we tracking us learning English.
Yes.
Tracking it in the monitoring center.
And do family members ever also get a feed of this information as well? Is that possible?
Yeah, so we have just started, it's funny that you bring that up, we've just started to give family members the ability to, first of all, see the data if the patient agrees, and second of all, join into the calls. So if you are a patient and you call in and we have a family member on file, we can say, Mrs. Jones, do you want your daughter on this call? And then we can reach out and have multiple people, similar to a Zoom session where you see multiple faces, all involved in that care in real time.
That's great.
We have a question from Art.
Good.
Arthur.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, I just have a question in connection with VR, virtual reality. And I understand that in this environment that you guys are talking about with seniors and caregiving and so forth, in order to deal with one of the major issues, and that is loneliness.
Yes.
I understand that VR can serve as a way through the gaming process of creating avatars and things that they can, you know, if they're predisposed to any kind of computer, you know, they being seniors could use the avatar and the game as a company keeping them busy and their minds off of loneliness. Anybody have any ideas about that?
I mean, it sounds amazing. I haven't seen it in action at this point, but you know, it is a good approach. There are a lot of isolated seniors out there, more than you can possibly imagine. And you know, some of them are more tech savvy than others. So I think if it were as you said, somebody predisposed to a computer, they may be able to manage that. Others probably would need a little more assistance.
But you have given me a great idea to talk to my patients about that, because I am a nerd who likes to play a lot of video games.
Well, it's really nice on video games when you're actually playing against other players and you're chatting with them. And as the younger people age, we're going to actually have that ability to have like communities where we play together. But we could, if we're in a wheelchair, it wouldn't stop us from participating, which is good. There was a sci-fi show that got me worried about interacting with AI bots, or like I'm hoping, and I'd like to hear your opinion, but I'm hoping that we always have some human interaction, you know, some human touch.
I guess we have one more question here, because I heard something about like where the human interactions replaced or should be supported by call center, by IT here. Maybe that's something that Anthony can address, or we do have technology experts in this list, the participants list too. Should we touch base this?
So you want to know about, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So you're asking where IT meets the human portion of this, touching with the patients and interactions. Is that what you're asking?
I mean, frontline can be considered as a human being, but these human beings are interacted through technology, and maybe technology can simplify this interaction. What can be improved using technology?
Yeah, so I mean, going back in regards to the AI stuff, we are partnering with certain companies that are enhancing our ECG data and providing additional alerts that we don't currently have. That provides the clinicians and the wellness coaches like Justin with more information when they go and approach these patients and get on the calls and, you know, hey, we noticed, you know, that this was happening, you know, how are you feeling? Is there anything we could do for you? Can we call anybody? And just from things that we're already doing already, we've had instances where while on the call, patients have, you know, fallen or had some other type of event happen, and EMS shows up and we're on the tablet already and we're interacting with EMS while they're taking care of the patient. And we could actually say through the technology, it's okay, the patient's fine based on the vitals and the ECG data we're seeing now. You guys can leave the patient there at home and we'll take it from here. So right there in those kinds of situations, the technology is already doing things that we hadn't even thought of doing when we went into this project. Moving forward, we have plans to simplify the technology even further, make it easier for the patients to use, make it easier for the clinicians to use, make it faster. And I think that's really where things are going to move is how can that interaction happen quicker between the patient and the clinician and the wellness coaches. So more of a minimalization of the technology so it kind of melts into the background.
Right, that was kind of what I was alluding to before, is that, you know, Anthony's built this really complex back end with multiple layers that the patient never sees. All they see is, I touch this button, I talk to my doctor, I talk to my wellness coach, I get in touch with someone immediately. And you know, those of you that are really involved in an elderly person's life, you know that if it's more than just turning it on and touching a button, it's too much. So we really had to strive to make it as simple as possible, and the simpler it is on the front end, the more complicated it is on the back end. So Anthony has you know, really brought us to a whole new level of simplicity for the end user.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone. Yulia, do you want to thank everyone? I thought it was really interesting. Oh, we have two new guests.
We have questions.
What? Yes.
Arthur has a question, I guess, right? Again.
No, you answered my question.
Okay.
And I would say that if you're interested in somebody that's an expert in the VR space, I can put you guys in touch with them, and maybe that could be one of the topics, and this could be further investigated through someone. I know someone that actually does it much like you do public access TV, go into communities and train community people, you know, to use VR, and you can actually train seniors to be able to deal, you know, in this space and to do, you know, whatever is that they want to be trained to do. And the community basically will ask them to come in to do those kind of trainings and put those modules in front of the public, you know, that they're going to train for.
You know, Arthur, it's funny that you say that, because one of the ideas we had was to create a sort of community, a virtual community center for our patients. You know, it doesn't matter if you're in New York City or California, you know, being around and involved with people that have either similar health issues or similar isolation and loneliness concerns. So we were dabbling with the idea of a community center. Adding a layer of VR to that really might make it fun for the seniors. You know, they can make themselves look however they want. They can make themselves sound however they want. They could play bridge in VR, you know, a whole nother level.
Yeah. I tried to find you on LinkedIn, Rachel, but I couldn't find you on LinkedIn.
I am.
Yes.
Under what name?
Rachel Mcintosh, MCINTOSH.
Okay. Well, maybe you just need to find me. I know I'm on there. So just look for me and then friend me, and I'll put you in touch with that person.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Put your name in the chat group, and that way she can grab the information and communicate. That's one way.
And if anyone has anything to offer, any services to offer, any ideas to discuss, you can put it into the chat room. So what I will do the next, I will stop recording. I will appreciate all the attendants for being here as a part of our webisode, and you will be able to network if you have any ideas to share a little bit longer.
Yes.
So I'm
Thank
saying
you.
that I'm stop recording. Thank you so